So tonight's talk is related to what I wrote about in the newsletter and the article. So if you read that, some of this is going to be repetition. If you didn't read it, shame on you. If you don't get the newsletter, anybody out there listening and all of you guys in here, tell somebody at the desk, we need your email address so that we can start spamming you every single month with incredibly useful information. So it started off kind of related to the question of the week. The question of the week here is, what is the most enjoyable thing you can remember doing, or maybe it was like your most enjoyable memory with your family over the last 3 years? And it made me start to think about the way that I think of my family and probably the way that most of you guys think of your family, which is some people hear that question and they think, everything that I do with my family is so fun, I can't possibly choose. My life is filled with myriads of, that's not how you use that word. It's filled with so many memories that are wonderful, I just can't decide. And then most of us think, I'm struggling to remember something fun that I did with my family. Now, I actually have a decent amount of fun with my family. We see each other pretty reasonably often. And still, I think that most of us would say we wish that we had more fun, more contact, or we at least think that we should think that way. Like, I think that I should think that I want to spend more time with my family. And it's all kind of about like the nature of our relationships with people. And relationships with people would be fine and totally problem-free if we were the only people in that relationship. Even that's not true, because we hate ourselves too. But we run into problems with other people because we think that, I wish that our relationship was more like this. I wish that we talked more. I wish that it was this way or that way. And usually we're putting at least part of the blame on that other person. And we just think, yeah, but that's just the way that person is. Or if you're a little bit more, with it, you say, that's just the way that we are. That's just the way that our relationship is. All of that is BS, but it is very natural and very common that we think of somebody as being like a fixed object. And we essentially think of them as like a Greek statue that's unchanged by the years. And we can understand on an intellectual level that this person has changed, and we can understand that the relationship changes and all of that. But when you think of somebody, your first kind of response, instinct, emotional response to them, is something based on what has happened in the past. And we assume that they are going to be the same today, right now, at least as they were the last time that we dealt with them. And that is kind of silly if you think about it, because we all change. We change every single day. Yet we tend to treat people like they're the same because it's just simpler that way. And we drag our baggage into today. Everything from the past, we are bringing that into this conversation and this time that we see that person. So the example that I use, and I've talked about this several times in meditation because it's the one that I remember the most, and it really hits home for me, is with my own mom. And I have a great relationship with my mom. I see her pretty regularly. We talk all the time. I love her. And it didn't used to be as good, but it was fine. My relationship, I would never say like I have a terrible relationship with my mom. We hate each other. We never talk, and we wish that each other would die. But I did kind of think like, it could be better. We could have better conversations. We could kind of connect more. And I would always think of my mom as being like a mom, where she is constantly nagging me and trying to tell me what to do and trying to tell me how to live my life. And that was The story that I'm going to tell you happened more recently than you might think from the way that I'm talking about it. This was in the last couple of years. And I'm not a child, but I still, we have a tendency to have that same kind of relationship, like that child-parent relationship where, I don't know about you guys, but when I hang out with my family, especially with my brother, we kind of fall back into those same roles, and it's like we push each other's buttons, and it happens automatically. And my brother and I turn into teenagers at best, and we are like bickering and fighting like we have no idea how to live our lives. And it's just like that kind of way that when we connect with somebody that we've been around for a long time, it's even more forceful. So with my mom, every time I got a call from her, I would look at the caller ID and say, oh, what is this going to be about now? What is my mom about to complain to me about? What is she about to tell me that I should be doing differently? And my mom is hilarious. I swear to you, I have been running a successful business, a martial arts school, and have students and have not needed to borrow money for quite some time. And still, far into that process, my mom would try to come up with things like, oh, you should do this for a living. You could make money doing this. I'm jumping all over the place here. I make my wallets out of tape because when I was a kid, I read an article in Rolling Stone, I think, about Chris Cornell, God rest his soul. And he used to make, every time Soundgarden finished an album, he would make a new wallet out of duct tape. And I thought, that's a cool idea, I'm going to try to do that. And I made one out of duct tape, and it fell apart immediately and made my money smell awful, so I made one out of packaging tape. And the packaging tape wallet is sweet. It lasts for like a decade or longer. And it's free with the cost of the tape, which is like $2, and it lasts forever. One time somebody gave me a super fancy Coach leather wallet, like very nice and very expensive, and I lost it after like a year, and I just made my wallets out of tape from then on. But my mom saw my wallet, and she said, this thing is really cool. You should sell these. And I'm like, Mom, it takes me somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour to make this. How much do you think I can sell it for? And she's like, I don't know, you could just try and make it faster, or maybe you could get other people to make them, and then you could sell them. And I'm like, Mom, I teach martial arts, and I have a dojo, and I go there every day. And yeah, I might have enough time to make them, but that's not what I do. And little things like that where it's clear from you guys listening to this probably at this point that this is my mom just trying to be helpful, but it never occurred for me as being helpful. It only occurred for me as my mom is nagging me, my mom is trying to tell me that I should be doing something differently. And so one day, she called my phone, and I looked at it, and I said, what's this going to be? And I answered the phone, and I started listening to her. And sure enough, she started complaining about something and telling me what she thought I should be doing differently. And I saw myself almost like from the outside. It was like I was over here listening to the thoughts in my head going, what? She's bitching about this. She's telling me about this. And I'm thinking about the ways that I'm in my head trying to defend myself and all that stuff. And I realized, oh, I'm doing this, and maybe it's not actually happening the way that I think that it's happening. And so I kind of let all that talk in my head go, and I just got to basically a blank space where I just I had no baggage, I had no preconceived notions of who my mom was, and I just actually listened to what she was saying. And it became super obvious that she just loved me and was trying to help me and was trying to just give me helpful advice. And this is how she shows that she loves me. And I said, Mom, I got it. You love me and you want me to have the best possible life. And all this stuff that you're telling me is about that. And she says, of course it is. And it completely changed my relationship with my mom from then on. Maybe not even from her perspective so much, but from me, whenever I hear her now, I get it. Like that love is pouring through. And it is it is a very different way of looking at people. And when I did that with my mom, I realized that I was doing that with everybody else. And I recognized that what I've been doing is, on some level, it's like I'm making people very small. I am kind of pigeonholing them into this role. I am limiting them and saying that this person is this way, and not allowing for all of the other possibilities. And this is something that you guys have experienced, I'm sure, in your own life and your own relationships, but you experience this in practice too, especially when you're doing like a higher level technique, or drill rather. You're doing sparring, and you're lined up there in front of somebody, and you're lined up in front of Doug, and you say, I know that Doug is about to do that like traveling roundhouse kick back fist, or the back fist traveling roundhouse kick. And it's because he's done it to me so many times. And if you get that in your head, then if he does that and you're ready for it, you might be able to successfully deal with it. But if he does any of the other thousands of things that we could do in that drill, I'm screwed because I'm attached to that one thing. And we do this to our partners in the dojo sometimes until you've been hit enough, and then you start to realize, okay, what I need to do here is stop that. I need to stop being attached to guessing, thinking, assuming what's happening. And I need to just allow myself to be in this open mental state where I can accept whatever my partner throws at me, and then I can respond to that. And you do so much better when that happens after you are at a certain physical level of skill, and then you have the ability to actually move. Obviously, if you try to jump ahead and you don't know how to do the technique, and you just think, I'm just gonna move and be in Mushin and not think about it, then you're just a mess. But after a certain point, that is really all of what it is. And you've heard this cliche saying about martial arts or X sport, whatever it is like 10% physical and 90% mental, or some variation of that ratio. And it is really true in martial arts. You have to think a lot about how to do the technique. You have to try to fix the technique over the years. And there is obviously all this repetition involved, and that part is certainly physical. But at a certain point, you have to mentally get yourself in the space where you can step back, get yourself out of the way, and just let it happen and let it flow through you, right? So the thing is, with your relationships and the way that you deal with people, there is a lot of repetition that's gone into it that is not actually helpful. So what we do in the dojo is we take these things that are kind of natural for us, like somebody throws a punch at you and you close your eyes, and we try to untrain that. We train that out of you and replace it with something better, like moving out of the way and keeping your hands up. And there are certain things that you may have done when you were young, maybe when you were a baby, that worked really well, and then something happened and you kind of got it trained out of you. Or a lot of times what happens is we get something kind of like traumatic, and it could be something that everyone would agree is traumatic, something very serious, painful, scarring, or it could be something that you can, look at now, back 20, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, however old you guys are, and see this thing that happened when I was 3 years old wasn't a big deal, but I made it a really big deal, and that changed who I was in that moment. That changed who I was going to be for the rest of my life. Because we love to make these decisions when we're super young, and those decisions basically get like etched in stone. And this thing happened, I raised my hand in class. This actually happened to me. I used to be a really good kid when I was like 7 years old. I was sitting in class in first grade, and they handed out our math workbooks. And I excitedly opened up my math workbook and started to do the problems. And the first grade teacher, who was a nun, I went to Catholic school, Sister Dominica gave me 13 detentions in 1 year. And most of them were undeserved. But I started doing my work, and she came over and she yelled at me. She's like, "Stop that. You're not supposed to be doing that right now." And I'm pretty positive in that moment I decided, I hate math. I still hate math. Like, I'm not very good at it. I don't try to do it. I count to 10 in Chinese, not even doing that very well, and that's like the limit of it. I mean, and it's funny because I was reasonably intelligent, and I tested out of math in college, so I didn't really have to take it. But there's still this part of me that is very sincerely certain that I hate math and I'm bad at it and I never want to do it again. So if I could just have somebody else do math for me the rest of my life, that would be wonderful. I don't do any of the bookkeeping. I have staff who does that. We hire bookkeepers. Somebody else does the taxes and all that stuff. And it's funny to look back and see that and who knows if this is the one thing that happened, but to at least take that on as a possibility of I did this thing. And it's funny because we do this to other people and we do it to ourselves, where it's something happens and we just assume that this is the way that it's going to be. And we don't give ourselves or other people this kind of latitude to change. And of course I've changed dramatically. I've gone like this with how I am as a student. When I became a martial arts student, I started to love to study. I started to love to work hard for the first time in my life, probably since I got yelled at for doing math. And it was like a big moment for me where I realized this. And if I met anybody from a week earlier in my life before starting martial arts, they would not know who I was. They would be completely surprised by the passion that I had for something, for anything, and for working hard and really trying to become great at it. And this happens to us all the time, on subtle levels, on big levels. But it is just so simple for us to think of other people especially, but also as ourselves, as being kind of fixed objects, like statues, and this really messes with us. Because that, again, kind of gets us to this really narrow view of this person and doesn't allow us to be kind of creative and see how this thing could go differently in our relationships. Instead of thinking that's just how that person is, I might enter into a conversation like, okay, I'm going to try to just listen and get what this person is saying. Get the words that they're saying, and also get the emotion that's behind it, and get where they're coming from, and get their intention, and get who they are. And that's impossible to do if you've already made up your mind about who that person is. So we want to do this. We practice this in meditation all the time. The basic kind of function of our meditation practice is when you have a thought, you let it go, and you come back to the breath. In meditation, the breath is our anchor in the moment. The breath is the thing that allows us to be free of all those extra thoughts, to be free of all of those other attachments, and to just be present in the moment with the breath, with yourself. And that kind of function of your mind of recognizing a thought and letting it go and coming back to the moment as quickly and as often as you can is the same kind of thing that we want to take into our physical practice, right? You're lined up and you're throwing techniques and you jump the count because you're in your head, and then you start thinking about, oh, I messed up the last one, and that makes you mess up the next one and the next one. And so you have to, in that moment, and literally all you have is a moment before the next count comes, you have to be able to just let that go and come back to this one. And this technique in this moment and the thoughts that you have in this moment could be completely different from the thoughts that you were having 5 seconds ago. And the technique could be completely different, completely better. It could also be completely worse. It's part of the joy of practice. So we try to do that on a really rapid pace in class. And that makes it a lot harder, but we try to do it. And then we try to do this in the rest of our lives, right? So you guys have heard my definition of a martial artist. I stole from Sifu Brown. His definition of a martial artist is somebody who takes what we learn and does it outside. And that's not punching and kicking people or just defending yourself. It's being able to use the principles and the mechanics of our mind and the way that we are reprogramming ourselves to move and think and breathe and be present, to take that outside into life, which is quite difficult because in the dojo everything is set up really nicely. Everybody is kind of on the same page as you. Everybody's trying to help you do this. And the dojo is the place that you're used to coming in here and, okay, this is my place. This is where I do this. This is where I breathe. This is where I'm okay. Nothing's going to hurt me unless it's advanced class. I'm good. And then when you go out into the rest of the life, the world, you've got all of these other cues that kind of work in opposition to that. You know, you get into your car and you're driving down the street and you go, this is where I hate life because of the traffic. Or you start, you answer your phone and this is where I hate this person because of all this stuff that they said in the past. And you want to be able to recognize that as quickly as possible and come back to the present. So in a conversation, you just replace the breath with anything, a couple of different things. And you could even use the breath. You could recognize, I'm in my head too much. I'm just going to take a deep breath and be present and just be here. But I really like to just focus on what the other person is saying. And I catch myself thinking about what they're saying or thinking about what I'm going to say about what they're saying, or I catch myself doing whatever it is in here that is not reality, in this little world in my head, and I think, I don't need to do that right now. I can just let that go and focus on what this person is saying. And it is a whole other world over there. You've got your little world here. They've got their little world there. And when you get somebody and they get that you get them and that you're actually listening to them, they feel totally different about that. And your relationship can completely change. I had a great question in Tai Chi this morning. Somebody asked me, what do you do when somebody's always kind of trying to fight? They're being combative, not physically, but emotionally and verbally. They're trying to start these fights, and they're also kind of manipulative. And, if they don't get what they want from you, they're going to kind of go around your back and try to get it some other way. And, of course, there's a part of this that goes like, well, you need to stand up for yourself and, say what you need to say and set boundaries and all of that. But there's also a part of it where, we have a tendency to in that situation, like we do in many situations, to have this victim mentality and think that this is something that this other person is doing to us. And, we kind of take the power away from ourselves and give it to somebody else. And when you don't have the power, you don't have the responsibility, which can feel nice, but also there's nothing for you to do about it. There's no way for you to change this situation. It's just going to keep being the same way forever until, if you're lucky, that person changes. And that is kind of like if somebody physically attacks you and they knock you on the ground and you just hope that they stop beating you up once you're on the ground. That's not a great way to deal with that scenario. You need to be able to, take responsibility and do what you can do. So the advice that I gave this morning, because I've been thinking about it in this way, it might change a week from now, but right now the answer is, well, what you need to do is really listen to that person who's being super combative. Like right now, they're doing this and you're doing this back to them, and there's this kind of force against force, power against power, and as long as you're resisting that, it's going to keep happening. But if you can accept and you can really be this kind of like soft power, and you can, just like in push hands in Tai Chi, you can accept that push rather than trying to stop it or force against it, then you can play with that energy. And this is what a conversation is. A conversation is you playing with energy. It's you giving and taking with the other person, and they might be going really hard and really fast and really loud and lots of anger and lots of aggression. And if you choose to be there in the way, you're going to get blown over by it, or you're going to push back and you sink down to the same level as they are. But that's the ego responding. That is the little you trying to push back. But if you can just let that go and listen, you can get the world that they are in, and you don't have to take it personally. You can just recognize that this is what this person is experiencing right now. They are angry, and it doesn't have to have anything to do with me. Maybe they're even saying that it has to do with me, and I can recognize my part of the equation. But in the moment, for me to have a conversation like that is really going to transform a relationship, the little self, the ego, can't be in charge. You have to put that little kid who made those decisions when they were 5 years old, you got to put them in the back seat and just say, I'm in charge now, and I'm going to listen, and I'm going to not make this about me. I'm going to just listen and actually fill my consciousness with what's going on over here. And yeah, you might empathize and start getting kind of riled up yourself, but you're doing it from their perspective. And when that happens, then it has no real effect on you. It has no lasting effect, and in that moment, it has a tendency to not actually make you angry or upset, because it has nothing to do with you. This is a really difficult thing. In the moment, if you're getting yelled at, or you're being kind of sucked into this emotional state, and then you try to remember, wait a minute, Sifu said something a while ago, I'm going to try to do that. When you're already in that state, it's almost impossible. You kind of have to enter into the conversation with this in mind. And it's a decision that you want to make ahead of time. And the more that you practice it, the more it's going to be this automatic thing that you do, where this difficult conversation or this fight that you always have over and over again, you can decide ahead of time, the next time this happens, the next time I'm talking to this person, I'm going to step out of the way. I'm not going to deal with them the same way that I've always dealt with them. I'm not going to assume that they are that person. I'm not going to assume anything. I'm just going to listen and be there. And whatever happens in that conversation is great. And don't think that the conversation has to have any kind of specific outcome. When you drag that into it, that's just something else that's in the way. That's something else that you're bringing in there for them to fight against. So I'm just there, and it's a totally different way of talking and listening. And in that moment, that other person, oftentimes, if you melt with their aggression, if you just absorb it and you're totally cool with it, then that person is going to recognize. Maybe their ego will recognize, well, this is having no effect on them, so I'm just going to stomp off. Or maybe it's like when you are grappling with somebody who's using a lot of force. And one of my favorite things to do is I get some big strong guy who's trying to break me in half, on accident. I just go completely ragdoll. And they're moving, and they're super forceful, and lots of muscle, and they're just I'm moving around, and there's nothing there for them to fight against. It's literally they have an empty uniform, and they're trying to move me around, and it's how come I'm not feeling anything? And they get it. They get it first intellectually, but also they feel it. And when you feel that kind of energy from your partner, you have a tendency to also relax. And so then they kind of melt into you. And then you can really practice and just roll with somebody. And the conversation should feel the same. When you melt, oftentimes that other person is going to melt, and then you just become this really nice kind of feeling of energy and conversation and listening going back and forth. So we're going to work on that with our meditation tonight without getting all into all that stuff. Just recognize that part of my goal in meditation is to practice being able to get those thoughts, recognize them right away, those thoughts that I drag into whatever situation, whatever relationship I have, whatever it is, recognize it and just let it go immediately. So sit comfortably.